Hi everyone, welcome back to the Celts Are Here podcast. No, we're not in the huff. Declan and Quinny's back. Yes, Celtic get beaten their last outing. I know we've not been on since. Quinny, we won't tear it apart because that's probably been done to a death now. And during the international break, but we can look at it and see what lessons there is to be learned going into the weekend's game against Motherwell. But we're recording this on the Thursday afternoon before the match. How has the international break been for you?
Quite boring, to be honest with you. I kind of watched the Scotland results kind of come in from afar, if you like, but because I'm so deep on football and all the club stuff's on, I kind of took the international break as a wee mini holiday, a wee sabbatical, if you like. So yeah, but it's been a kind of long but quick international break. You know, it wasn't really that long on the calendar as such, but it's kind of dragged in, especially with all these injury news pieces that we keep getting dropped into us on the daily. Almost it was.
Yeah, that was a wee bit of concern. But we've not, as I say, we're recording this on the Thursday afternoon, so we don't have any info from Ange Postecoglou's press conference tomorrow. I'm sure some things will become a wee bit more clearer tomorrow when he comes out and he talks to the press and gives us an injury update. But I think you're right, Quinny, it was a bit of concern. A lot of guys featuring, probably none more so than Callum McGregor and Matt O'Reilly for Scotland and the Danish under 21s. Some guys not featuring at all. We will touch on that. I think Hajime Moriyasu's maybe not got too much of a liking for Rio Hatate at this point in time. But it is a wee bit concerning. But I think still at this point in time, we've probably still got the squad to be able to cope with it, don't we? Even if it is just, maybe for a week or so.
Yeah, I feel like, we're really seeing the test of the depth like really quickly, of course, when the manager and the club are kind of drawing up plans for the season. And like, I think we've all been really surprised and, full of praise for the club at how like comprehensive this window was. We got people all across the pitch in all sorts of positions locked in. And like you do that in the kind of Mayday event of an international break happens and like 4 attackers get injured, you've still got something to play with come the weekend. So yeah, I think that the depth is definitely getting tested this week. No doubt
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, no doubt about it. And I think if you go back a year, because that's all we can do with Ange Postecoglou. We can only go back a year. And can you imagine this position at this point in time last year when we were really threadbare? So I think there's probably still a blessing in that. I want to get onto the squad when we're having a look at the St Mirren game, because
Sure.
I don't think one game's going to dictate how good a squad it actually is. I still
Sure.
think we're still to see it get tested to its maximum. That might be in the next few weeks. But let's start with the injuries. And on one man who I think's the biggest concern at this point in time, Quinny, is Cameron Carter-Vickers. Going into the weekend's game, I don't think anybody should really be fearful that whatever centre-back pair you play, more than likely to be Stephen Welsh and Moritz Jens, should be an issue in domestic football. Now, I know people will look at that St Mirren game and say both played together. They didn't maybe look as comfortable at times as you'd like them to be. They've been undone by 2 high balls into the box. But realistically, these 2 guys should be good enough for a home game at Celtic Park against what you would describe, and no disrespect to Motherwell, as lower opposition.
Yeah, well, I think the pitch size definitely would suit the two of them much better. If you look at any good performance we've had from Welsh or Jens, like, striding, taking yards on the pitch is a big part of their game. And, like, yeah, they're definitely like, green on the gills or, whatever the saying is last week, both of them quite young and experienced centre-backs in the grand scheme of things. And St Mirren's game plan really exploited it. And it was one of those ones where, if you blink, in this division, in the away ground setting and all that kind of stuff, then you can be punished, But I think at Celtic Park, like the manager's showing, and we've spoke about it on this numerous times, but he's showing incredible faith in Welsh, especially for Welsh to be like we spoke about before, like Carter Vickers' shadow. So if he doesn't show faith in him now, when Carter Vickers is actually injured, then the manager potentially, depending on how you justify everything and the dynamics in training, etc., but he potentially then runs the risk of ruining that relationship he's got with a young academy player. So I think we play him.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And as well, you saw that the faith being shown in them at the start of the season. It could have been very easily. I know Moritz Jens had only, I think, arrived in a week or so probably before that Aberdeen game, but he brings Welsh into the team then. He pays dividends for it. He gets a goal. That was actually, I was in the post match. I always have this perfectly timed corner that whatever we're talking about. I've been in the post match or the pre match to talk to the manager about it, and I asked about Stephen Welsh and that the parties get to play in the squad, and he said he's big part to play. He'll get game time, and this is going to be the time he will get game time, and he needs to impress. And something that has impressed me in his game is he's always somebody who likes to play that risk pass forward. There was a lot, go back to this at Murn game, directed at Aaron Moy for the amount of packed passes that he played backwards.
Yeah.
Whereas Stephen Welsh has always been, as far as I'm concerned, the guy who's got a bit of vision about him and will always look to try and play that forward pass. And when you've got guys like Hatate or O'Reilly to get onto it, more than likely you're probably going to get some joy or create a chance out of it.
Yeah, completely. And that's why I think, like, the faith the manager's shown and obviously the close coaching that he's had since Postecoglou's been at the club, because, Welsh has played, like, as far as like an academy player goes, probably more than anyone under the manager. So, like, I do feel
Apart from
that,
Callum McGregor, we don't want people
apart from
telling us
McGregor,
off.
of course, apart from McGregor, how could I forget? So I do feel that what he brings, like what you're talking about, is exactly what the manager's been practicing with him in training over the last like year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, at this point. So, like, I think that this is a game where Welsh needs to repay a bit of faith in the manager if the manager does select him over Starfelt, who's maybe still a bit iffy, because Carter Vickers is, like, by all accounts, out for definitely the next week or so. And then I think we're maybe hoping to expect to see him back in training, maybe over the next kind of back end of this week, maybe early next week, I think, from the initial reports and like the time scale he gave us. So yeah, I think, like, if you consider that, because we don't want to rush Carter Vickers, we can't rush Carter Vickers, we can't rush him, break him again, So Welsh or Starfelt Jens, between the three of them, we have to get a good combination worked out of cover.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's about, I think that's a really good point, Quinn, that you make about repaying faith in the manager. Ange's certainly shown Welsh a lot of faith. And again, but we're talking about academy players, so we don't get dug up. We know Tony Ralston's featured quite a lot for Celtic too. But
Of course.
we know we'll get that in the YouTube comments. But no, I totally agree. I know there was some people even thinking maybe that Welsh fell in the same category as a Mikey Johnson. Maybe needed to go out and get more game time just to develop himself as a player. But he's going to get that game time, and one poor performance at St Mirren's not going to, make me judge him on that. I want him to have a strong performance against Motherwell at Celtic Park, and if he is called upon for that game in the Champions League next week, which we will come on to, away to Leipzig, he needs to have a big performance. But listen, he's played in European football before for Celtic, as you say, much like Ralston, much like McGregor. He's got a lot of experience as an academy player in that team and has played in European football. I'm thinking he came in as the right back, I'm sure, away to Ferencvaros last season. As a makeshift, and he was excellent that night. So listen, if he can show a bit of the faith, putting him back to the manager, I'm all for it, and hopefully he does do that. But Carter Vickers, not to spend too much time on him, Quinny, because I think we touched on him actually after the Rangers game and how important a player he is, how underrated he is in terms of he's not the guy that gets the plaudits every week, but he's so key to the way that we play. He is that steady figure at the back, and you do miss him. And going back to your point there, you don't want to rush him back, because people are going to get sick of me saying this sentence now. It's 13 games in 43 days. He's going to be crucial to that stretch of games. I do imagine there will be some rotation at times in that period of game time. I'm thinking maybe that away game up at St Johnstone, which is wedged in between both Leipzig games. I'm thinking the away game to Fir Park, and in the League Cup there will be rotation. I don't doubt that. But looking at this point in time, with defenders in the team, it's going to be important that we get Carter Vickers back in there, due to that stretch of games that we're going to need to play.
Yeah, he's the most important one to our, like, overall success. Like, those St Mirren goals are completely avoidable for the most part, with you'd imagine anyway, with somebody like Carter Vickers on the pitch. But again, like Welsh, I mean, I can very easily imagine a world where Welsh can go back into a game away to St Mirren and be as good as or as effective as Carter Vickers, as the season rolls on.
Quinny, can I
that chance?
Jump in and ask you that? Is that more down to the way that Celtic play rather than his own performance? Because I've read a lot, listened to a lot of people over the past couple of weeks since that St Mirren game, and people were saying, if Celtic maybe go 1-up in the game, which is the reliance on the attacking players to go and do so, Welsh and Yents don't have a tricky afternoon, because St Mirren's game plan at that point in time completely changes, because you then Celtic defenders generally in the league will have a lot of the ball at their feet and have little pressure put upon them. Do you think that's more about the way that Celtic play rather than them as individual performers?
Well, yeah, like that totally stacks up for me, because that's that St Mirren game was a big game of sliding doors. Like if we do get the opening goal, as you say, the whole the way everything pans out doesn't happen, of course, and then who knows how the result goes. But I think, like Welsh's ceiling for me, and definitely in the manager and the club's opinion, is way above being an effective operator away to St Mirren. The club definitely see him as potentially being, in 3 or 4 years' time, our main centre back. Maybe that's something that they're thinking about. So, like Starfelt as well comes into this, because before the international break, it was like, oh, he might be just kind of roundabout back in time for Leipzig. Obviously, this is the game before Leipzig, so maybe he's on the bench. Maybe he's progressed really well over the international break. But I do feel that, like I think Welsh and Jens will be selected again, considering like Starfelt and Carter Vickers, if they are the number one partnership, which I think we probably all think is in the cold light of day, we need to get them back in a good condition, not the first condition that they can get on the pitch in.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because we brought. We don't know what the circumstances around obviously Starfelt's injury was when he picked it up with Sweden, but we brought him back in. He's played that game up at Tannadice, get a goal. He came on back from injury at Rugby Park, and he pulls up in that Rangers game, and that's him out again. And that probably ties into what you're saying there, Quinny, with Cameron Carter-Vickers, that you don't want to rush somebody back just due to this stretch of game time. We're going to have all those weeks off during the World Cup. Carl Starfelt's not going to be there. Cameron Carter-Vickers potentially could be, but the other centre halves definitely aren't. So you're going to have three of them at least getting the feet up for a while, on a trip to Australia. So to get through this next batch of fixtures is going to be crucially important. And I think you're right in saying that it's about managing players' game time and not rushing them back too quickly, because over the grand scheme of things, if it's one game that Vickers misses and that's Motherwell, or if it's two and it's Leipzig, which would be a big blow, you'd much rather that and he plays the next 11 games than possibly coming in
Yeah.
for one of those games and then being out for another 5.
Yeah, for sure. The kind of the paradigm, unfortunately, I think the manager runs into with this is like somebody like Starfelt. Do you wrap him in cotton wool against Motherwell? If he is like touch and go, he's almost back ready to play, and then start him against Leipzig out the cold almost. So there is a wee bit of me that does think maybe the manager will want to get a few minutes in his belt first of all. So maybe we do see him appear, but I don't think if we do see. Like, cause I actually think with and again, I'm trying my best not to run down in different directions, whatever. But I think with some of the injuries that we've had in the forward areas, like this weekend will be very different for second half substitutions compared to games gone by. Like I think there's a fair shout. Somebody like Kyogo gets 90 minutes, maybe Jota. Jota's the most likely forward to get 90 out of all of them anyway. But we might see like Bernabei get a few minutes because Taylor played like a bit towards the end of the international break, and I know he didn't do a lot of minutes, but it was at the end of the window, so he will have like fatigue to carry.
Yeah, I think it was possibly near enough a full half against the Republic of Ireland, and definitely 90 minutes over in Krakow. So he's again. I think the manager has said all that stuff about players getting a rest and whatnot, but he will be wanting to manage game time. I think that's a fair point. There's even been potential that people saying, linking into what you're saying there, Quinny, with Bernabei, we saw him come on at that game at Tannadice as a left winger, and the manager knows he can get forward. And if you're maybe, best case scenario 2-3-0 up against Motherwell at Celtic Park, why not fire him on and try and protect when you get attacking players? Because at this time, that's probably the area of the pitch where you're a bit short in at this point in time.
It's a great shout, by the way. I would not rule out seeing that, because again at Celtic Park, the way we've, the little glimpses we've had of Bernabei, I could see him playing down the wing for 20-30 minutes in the second half, no problem. So that's a great shout for giving maybe a wee bit of the forwards some reprieve if we don't have like Haksabanovic, Giakoumakis, Maeda, these guys on the bench.
Yeah, just due to the fact that we've seen him before, it was one that afternoon I thought it's a bit strange, but obviously Ange sees something that we know he can go forward. He's certainly got that ability. We know he can hit a ball as well, and that might be something he looks to just try out, just down to the lack of numbers that we've got in forward positions at this point in time. But again, I think that links well into the rotation that were made at St Mirren Park, where a lot of people are saying 6 changes, going into an international break, resting players, which the manager's held his hands up to. Celtic will learn from this, I don't doubt that. But
Yeah,
resting players, I think the 5 subs rule, which means you said in here time and time again, it helps us. People would rather see us play their strongest ish 11 from the start, then make the subs rather than the other way about.
completely. And I think sorry, I think on that note, like from St Mirren and like what you were saying there, one thing I've been thinking about is in this international break is like, Welsh, Jens, Hart, and there's a couple others that we'll probably come on to previewing the game, but like they've not been away this international break, so like,
Or Jota.
or Jota, so, but I'm particularly thinking just because we're kind of chatting about the defence and like the rotation and stuff, because like, that like Jens, Welsh, and Hart, like they've just been at Lennoxtown for the last 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever it is, practicing, training, preparing for this kind of run up of fixtures, So as much as like I was really surprised because the manager's really kind of more known to us as a guy that will play the hot hand, keep the guys that are fit and firing, keep them playing, no time to rest, keep going, rest at the end of the season kind of attitude.
You'd imagine maybe Starfield would have been part of that wee trio as well, making it
Yeah.
quadruple possibly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with the view against Starfield, definitely getting the
Yeah.
reps up and stuff, 100%. So I think that, it did catch me by surprise how many rotations we've seen at St Mirren, but I think that's maybe the first part of the manager, like really starting to show his hand in terms of like, he does understand that these guys will pick up injuries. And like, it's frustrating when, like I was really happy that Japan were only doing all their games in Germany. So I thought that was a great kind of start to the windows. Like, great, we're not really getting people really leaving Europe. USA with Carter Vickers, if he made the squad, they were also in Germany. And yeah, everyone was kind of staying in Europe mainly for the most part. I don't think anyone left Europe, Aaron Moy. But the interesting thing about Aaron Moy, by the way, and I had a wee headache trying to do my predicted lineup, Declan, this week, because Aaron Moy and like a few guys from like, I don't know, the Hearts and Dundee United or whatever, all get sent home after the first Australia game so that they could get back to Scotland, get back to their clubs and get ready for this part of the season. So Aaron Moy's actually been back in situ much longer than like any other international player, which is an interesting detail to note as well.
Yeah, also think it was good that he got 90 minutes under his belt for
Yeah,
Australia and that 1-0 victory against New Zealand. And fair play to him too, he was named in Australia's team of the century, which
seen
is,
that.
it's a great privilege for any player to do that. And Callum McGregor, just looking at it, just to touch on it, because it says a lot about them as players. He's nearing 50 caps for Scotland. His next cap will be his 50th, and you get a lovely, I was listening to Alan Ruff talk about this, you get a lovely golden medal if you get 50 caps for Scotland. So Callum McGregor will be adding that to the trophy haul that he's already got. But yeah, that's a really good point in Aaron Moy, because he's rested and whatnot. And we know another guy who is rested, most definitely, is Rio Hatate.
Yeah,
As I say, Hajime Moriyasu doesn't seem to fancy him for whatever reason. I don't think Hitates did himself any harm in the Champions League for Celtic. I think there's probably a bit of worry actually, Quinny, from some quarters of the Celtic support that Hatate performing at the Champions League and possibly getting a start for Japan in the World Cup could really put the attention on him. But I expect him to get very little minutes at the World Cup. At this present time, he's only had one international cap. They've got a group that contains Spain, Germany, and Costa Rica. So going off that and not playing against either Ecuador or the USA, I don't expect Hatate, unless Japan have an injury crisis, to be appearing at the World Cup at all.
yeah. It's funny because I previewed the Japan team right as the international break came in. Obviously, there were a lot of Celtic players there and a few others that I'm quite close to. But like the Japan system, like the manager's not really well thought of by many neutrals at this point, certainly. And I don't think in Japan he's particularly popular. But the way that they play, like there's not really room for a real Hatate in there, because the way that their double midfield works mainly relies on like Eo Tanaka, maybe somebody like Endo's in, Watanabe, not Watanabe, sorry, I'm getting teams muddled up. But So the two that sit, none of them are like Rio, and Rio's very distinctively different to a lot of them. And then in those kind of forward creative areas, again, they've got guys that are probably on the same level as Rio, but Rio's not really playing in those positions for us. So it's one of those ones. I actually think Rio is going to be coming back in this game with like a fire up his backside, like determined to like run the games and like really like put everyone to shame for not, in Japan for not picking them or whatever, because he will be scorned by that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he'll be disappointed, but as I say, I don't think he's did himself any harm with the performance against Shakhtar and Real Madrid. And he was a big miss at St Mirren. I think both were, and I think that'll be something that the manager will know to not do again. We saw that midfield of McGregor, Moy, and Turnbull featured at Ross County. This is something that I've spoken about with a couple of people. We will come on to it because I think there's interesting comparisons to draw between both games when looking at the squad as a whole. But we saw that midfield be effective in Dingwall. It wasn't effective at St Mirren Park, and I think a lot of that was down to just very cautious passing. And they didn't get the time in the ball that they probably did up in Dingwall, which is the reason. I think that's maybe why now, Quinny, that midfield could effectively be used at Celtic Park. Certainly won't be this weekend. We know David Turnbull's out. But I think maybe in games like going to St Mirren Park or a Fir Park or whatever, I don't think you'll see that midfield trio of McGregor, Moy and Turnbull again. And I know a lot of people have been talking about pushing McGregor further forward. I think people are starting to realise now that he is best left as the pivot, linking the play between the defence and the forward players, and being, as we always describe him, as Celtic's metronome in there, which I think was something that you missed at St Mirren Park. It was almost as if, he was just so used to that role that he plays constantly that it became like a double pivot, and you definitely don't need that against a St Mirren when you're chasing goals.
Yeah, I remember watching McGregor quite closely in the first half for that whole attacking midfield kind of angle that I've been long kind of waiting to see from him. And like it did take until like the 35th, 34th minute or something for him to appear on the edge of the St Mirren box in possession of the ball, So that's how, in my kind of, I was streaming the game live. I was watching it on my channel. And in the post match, that was my kind of takeaway from like the first half in particular. Is like we basically threw away the first half an hour. Like the first half an hour just bled away into nothing. Nothing happened. We didn't achieve anything. We didn't even get a rhythm going or anything.
But I said to my pals, I was standing with my pals early, Monica and Aaron, I said, this is rubbish. Because it really was a pure game of football to watch. And even at half time, you weren't sitting there Quinny thinking about created chances, we're going to come out in that. It just passed us by. But if you were a neutral watching it, I think you'd have probably turned it over to whatever other game was on.
Aye, for sure, man. Well, I had lots of neutrals in the live chat giving it, where's the goals?
I thought this was meant to be free-flowing attacking football. Would you agree with that, with what I'm saying about the midfield then, that, it worked in Dingwall, and I keep drawing in that game because it's the only other time that we've seen wholesale changes. It worked against what people would say is an opposition probably on part of a St Mirren. People will say that Ross County play a wee bit more open attacking football, but listen, they like to put the boot in. Certainly both, when we play against them, have a game plan how to play against us. And it's
Did
always
Giakoumakis start that Ross County game?
Well, that's going to be what I want to come on to. That pulls us in there really, really nicely. Same midfield three, same two wingers, but Giakoumakis played. So there's a throw over to you. Another man we know who is not likely to feature this weekend. Gus Poyet saying he won't play the weekend. Hopefully he's back, obviously, for Wednesday, whether to start or come off the bench, slightly come off the bench. Yeah. Do you think that's going to be important if you see that midfield trio feature again, Quinny, that you maybe have that target man like Giakoumakis playing up there, because Kyogo in that St Mirren game but just gone missing because he just wasn't getting any service, and he's not a player like Giakoumakis who will drop deep. He did that exceptionally well in that Rangers game. It was selfless how far he was coming. He was dragging defenders out of it. Do you think that's important, especially when you've got wingers like Maeda and Abada, who technically like to go and cut inside, and they create that space by Giakoumakis dragging people out?
Yeah, well, I think I think Moy was really ineffective against St Mirren for the simple fact that any good pieces of play we've seen from Moy has been when he's been able to play the ball over like 15 yards and beyond, And against Ross County, he was able to do that. And that's why I was thinking, I was thinking back to that game. I was like, yeah, I'm sure Giakoumakis was like, because the way I remember thinking about that Ross County game is with Moy and Giakoumakis, we had a really great like verticality in the game. Like we could actually take away a lot of the pitch quite well. And we were talking about it, I think, at some point, but it wasn't really long balls as such. But it was that this guy can actually just pass the ball really long and get it somewhere. Whereas,
It's even good for Joe Hart, I think, as a target man,
yeah,
just to aim to. Sometimes, if you want to maybe take a wee bit of the sting out of the game and get yourself up the park, you play it up to him, and you've got those great options in midfield and the wing that they can then take you forward.
completely. But against the Mirren, Moy couldn't play he didn't play a pass really. Maybe he played one, but he didn't play any passes longer than 10 or 15 yards. They were all quite short. So he, like McGregor, can play that kind of game and be really effective. But Moy, again, whenever I've seen him do anything good in a Celtic shirt, like for the few appearances he's had, have been long, dynamic balls, rangy. He spotted something, he sees space, and we're able to exploit it. But St Mirren didn't give us any space like that. And if you're then also firing those balls, or he's thinking about firing them, and all you see up there is like Kyogo and Maeda and stuff, you're just shelling it away to nothing and you're going to get booed, So I think it was just not the place for Moy more than anything. But that midfield three, like, I think Giakoumakis is probably the most important part to that.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point. So, do you think that potentially you could see that midfield three again playing, but Giakoumakis is key? That if you do play it, he needs to play.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Or if we're having some sort of situation where I think even it changes quite a lot if you take Turnbull out of the equation, because McGregor wants to take lots of touches, Moy doesn't mind taking lots of touches,
But you've
and
got a high energy player.
Turnbull needs to take every touch in the world possible. He needs to do everything twice. um, so I think if you take Turnbull out that equation, I think Moy and McGregor can still work, and Moy anchoring and McGregor being a bit more free ranging. If you plug in an O'Reilly or a Rio alongside that somehow, I think.
Yeah, a high energy midfielder that maybe just gives you that wee spark, that was certainly a creative spark that we lacked at St Mirren. So yeah, I think that's also key, Quinny, that and again, you don't want to overreact to this, and I think that's why it's important to tear both apart, see what lessons can be learned, and how you go forward with it.
Yeah.
Because one game, one bad performance, a bad day at the office after a European game, and I want to actually put a wee slight emphasis on this. That was Celtic's first domestic game after a European game this season, and for some players,
Oh yeah.
you'll hear
Good point.
players say that it's easy, it's a seamless transition to go from playing in the Champions League. I've already heard Greg Taylor and Jota say they're surprised at how quickly the game goes by in the Champions League and how fast paced it is. People say it's a seamless transition. I think you and I and every other football punter knows it isn't.
Yeah.
And I think for some of them, they just get caught like a rabbit in the headlines. And that again, I think might even feed into a lesson that'll be learned from it, that you can't, swagger in from a Champions League game into a domestic game thinking this will take care of itself. You still need to turn up and perform.
Yeah, for sure. And I think coming into Motherwell, I don't think the manager would be taking it lightly at all. When I was kind of doing the predicted 11 and stuff, that was the first thing I was thinking is like, there's no way the manager is taking anything for granted after dropping 3 points to St Mirren, because you want to get the feel-good factor, like, not that it's went anywhere, but you want to, reinstate it almost. And obviously momentum into the Leipzig game is mandatory, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because we've went 3 games, which is incredible to say, without winning, which, under Ange Postecoglou's, that was something that was a feature at the start of the era as we were still developing and getting into his way of football. But listen, we've played quality opposition in that. I don't doubt that, after the Real Madrid game, I think we'd have probably, actually, I don't think he said in his press conference, he said he was wanting to ring the changer for the Livingston game. And you'd have been hoping that if you do that in a game like that at Celtic Park, you'd be absolutely fine. And you wouldn't have had the issues. And if you hadn't, you'd have learned the lessons going into the St Mirren game. But, Shakhtar Donetsk away, you're looking at, we probably should have taken 3 points. And then it's disappointing to go into the final game. You've had that, 100% winning run in the league to lose like that. But, totally, I think you need to pick yourself back up. And again, for the players that have been stewing in this for 2 weeks, I think it's actually good, Quinny. We've mentioned how many games Celtic are going to play in this next chunk of fixtures, but I prefer that that's happened now. It's let them stew. It's let them know what that feeling of defeat feels like once again in the domestic football. and press the big restart button and go again, because a result like that in amongst 13 games, might not have been the easiest thing to pick yourself back up. I know players will say they want to play right away after that and shake it off them, but for some people they don't like that, and this extended time off that they've had might just make them that wee bit more hungrier to go and prove themselves. And I think a lot of the guys that came in, the six rotational players, will know that their performance just wasn't good enough, and that when the manager does give them a chance, they need to impress and be knocking on his door and saying, I want to play here. Which I think,
Yeah,
it's inevitable that everybody wants to be playing for Ange Postecoglou, but they need to show that, there's a hunger to be wanting to play every single game for Celtic.
for sure. And on that kind of note, I'm holding out hope that maybe Japan have done us a wee favour with Daisen Maeda. Like, if he showed up international camp and he's been carrying a wee knock, he's maybe said, like, listen, guys, I need to get back in this team, and I'm 50-50, going to just send me up the road. Like, that's it, and I know that's not really how things work, but in my head, that's the way it worked for the back end after he got an injury, because, like, why, like, a fit and available Daisen Maeda is great for Japan, it's great for Celtic and all the rest of it, and his place in the team after St Mirren and the kind of run of maybe 2 or 3 performances running up to that, he's definitely on a shaky nail in terms of getting into this best 11. So I think, that's just an example that popped to my head. But I do think that every Celtic player over this international break will be assessing their place in the squad, mistakes they've made, how they can improve when they get their chance next time, how they're going to do better. And I think, like, over this next period, the first kind of, I don't know, let's say 5 games. So the next 2 European and the next 3 domestic. I think, like, what I want to see is whirlwind Celtic again from the beginning of the season, where it's every player is like 110% motivated and fit and firing, all pulling in the same direction. And how deep the squad is, once we get, but we don't really know the situation on some of the particulars, but once we get like Haksabanovic, Maeda, Kyogo, Giakoumakis, like all 6 of them are all fit. And even on top of that, by the way, as well, we've still got Abelgard, who before the international break, Ange said it was like a few weeks away. He's had maybe a few weeks now. And again, similar to Moy, maybe he's somebody that maybe is in the reckoning to maybe feature. But
And possibly Yusuke Ideguchi. I know he's not in the Champions League squad, but he's still there and he's back in training.
yeah,
And he'll be a guy who, I don't doubt, I continually keep saying this, Quinny. Ange Postecoglou signed him for a reason in January. There's absolutely
yeah,
no doubt that Ange just picked him as, just another player from the J League who we think it might work out with. And let's bring him in. He certainly brought him to Celtic for a reason. What that reason was, and you can look at this from different perspectives. He knew that Tom Roderick and Neil Beaton were going to be departing the club.
yep,
In rocks up Matt O'Reilly, a complete, uh,
unknown.
I don't want to say makeover for Tom Roderick, because both are quite handsome gentlemen, but you know, are the two of them ever been in the same room as each other, kind of thing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
In rocks Matt O'Reilly, and you bring in a Deguchi, who we know is, tended to play as a kind of deeper role, and he was the guy that a lot of people were saying out the free, even though the Ange knew Dyson from his time at Yokohama was the least risk, just
yeah,
due to his age, his profile, as in he'd played in British football before at Leeds United, and that he wanted that second chance. And even guys like that who are on the, whether it's the fringes or not, will want to play. As you say, Abelgard's not checked into Glasgow for a holiday to get away from Ruben Kazan for a year. He's here to play football, and
yeah,
he'll want to impress.
big time. So I think, like, when all those pieces are there, like you say as well, even Ideguchi coming in and pressing that midfield, like that's normally when, like, the early stages of the season, that's when we got the best football. That's when we started getting goals going in every day. Where, like, Abada's fighting for his place, Maeda's fighting for the place, Kyogo, Giakoumakis are fighting for the place. They're both scoring in the same game, even though they're subbing for each other. And I think if we get that over the next 5 games or so, like, I think the momentum will be phenomenal, and it could really be a really special part of the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It could be. I think for Daisy Maeda, just to kind of touch back in him.
Yeah, sure.
I think, you talked there, Quinny, about a whirlwind Celtic, which we have been at times. That's what suits his game. And
Yeah,
I don't think for Daisen Maeda, it's no disrespect to him as a footballer because he's got some engine, but I think he really prefers to be in a collective performance rather than be the standout individual. I think if you're 2-0 down like we were at St Mirren and you're looking for a goal, Dyson Maeda ain't going to do what Jota can do
Yeah.
and beat 3 or 4 men and come up with a bit of magic. Dyson Maeda will chip away as a team player. That's what he is. And I think if your team performance isn't going the way it should be, Maeda's not the guy that you're going to turn to. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, on current showing for sure. But again, whenever I'm slating or whenever I'm thinking negatively about Dyson Maeda, I always like feel myself checking myself on it. Like he is,
Yeah,
like he can
you
score
want
goals.
to kind of
Like,
say, no, stop it,
he
stop
is
it.
good. Like he is good, but you know, like we've got like Kyogo standards for him, basically, you know, and he's not Kyogo, but he is like
But we've got that expectation of Quinny as well, due to the fact that he was the top goal scorer in the J League after Kyogo left. So we're thinking, where are these goals coming from, Dyson?
yeah, but a lot of his goals, Dyson Maeda, is like you say, they're functional team goals. You know, he's not ripping people open. He's like maybe getting by a man with his pace and setting somebody up, or somebody else has done the hard work and then he just shows up for a tap in. You know, that's normally he's not scoring from outside the box, Dyson Maeda. You know, he's not scoring bicycle kicks anytime soon or anything like that. You know.
No. Although I say he's maybe not the guy to turn to. That header against Bodo was a cracker, but it's what you just described there, Quinny, as a functional team goal.
Yeah.
It was a case of everybody getting forward and him being in the right position to make his cell available for the header. But yeah, I think he'll probably be assessing his performance and saying, I expect probably more from myself than this. I remember reading an article before the season kicked off, and he had spoken about taking his running to another level. I think people already think he is the Duracell man, with the energy and the battery power that he's got. But that would be great. And in the forward positions at this point in time, we're going to be a bit short of the weekend. But you're hoping a guy like Maeda's back sooner rather than later. I think he's an important sub that if you play that whirlwind style against any team who's maybe starting to tire in a game, you're not fancying it at all. Just to kind of switch back in this one, but we spoke about the defenders, we spoke about the attacking players. Do you think now, with the shortage of personnel we've maybe got going into this game, it might just add to the manager's plans going into January? I read an article, Quinny. I know we're only going to be approaching the beginning of October, but he said, listen, they were already at work for January. Himself and Mark Lowell have been working very closely, looking at targets, centre half possibly, and maybe another striker potentially. Is that two positions you think the manager might be looking at? Because just now, maybe not always you're going to have two centre halves injured, but it leaves you with two with absolutely bugger all cover. You don't want that situation. Yakimakis is going to be out at the weekend. You find that one of your wingers is out who can play through the middle. We know Abada can do it, but you'd maybe like another centre forward. Do you think that's potentially two areas of the park that you might already be looking at towards January?
I think in terms of like additions to what we have, I think they're the only two places where you might say there's some sort of question mark. Because like, even between Kyogo and Giakoumakis, like both are internationals and both are quite different. So if you even added in another striker that's like one of them, then you've got a bit of replication there. Like if you have like two Giakoumakis types, for example, if Giakoumakis can't play, the other guy can play, and the style of the team doesn't change. So I definitely think there's merit in, or even the Kyogo, it could be the same kind of thing.
My dad describes you like this. My dad describes Giakoumakis as a guy who can come on and rumble it up. The two people that uses that for is Giakoumakis and Dykes that plays for Scotland. Two strikers that like to rumble it up. I thought I would just snick that in because I thought you quite like that one, Connie.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's what he's all about. But I could see the logic and I could see the squad benefiting from that kind of consistency that we would gain from another striker that resembles one of the two that we have already. And in defence as well, like I think in defence, particularly centre back, but you can say this for any position. If we buy somebody, they have to be level above what we have, or they have to be right at the bottom of the food chain, like a 17-year-old wonder kid or something.
Don't say Ryan Porteous because I'll scream.
Somebody like that. I don't think you don't buy somebody now for our defence that is on par with what we have. Like unless it's Carter Vickers. Like if you somebody who you think, we're going to spend 8 million on a guy,
absolutely welcome.
Yeah,
spend that
that should elevate it, But going and getting another Starfelt, going and getting another Welsh or a Jens type, I think just crowds the place up necessarily. So I think if we do go around for a centre back, I think we want to go either a clear elevation on standard, or again we're getting a Bernabei type in a project that can follow on the conveyor belt for later on.
Yeah. Have you mentioned Bernabei, Quinny? Then I remember when we started doing these pods. Has your opinion maybe changed a wee bit in that? Because I know that you had said initially at the start of the season that you expected Bernabei to end up coming in and being first choice, but that just seems to be completely out of the question, which I think is a lot to do with how good Greg Taylor continues to be for Celtic.
Well, yeah, I thought because Bernabei, from the profile we could see in Argentina before he arrived, he was very different to Taylor, like in terms of how he plays and whatever. So I thought if the manager's bringing somebody like that in, it was to implement that sort of weapon in the team. But for whatever reasons with Bernabei individually, maybe like the manager thought he was currently a 6 out of 10. It turns out he's currently a 4 out of 10 or something, But Greg Taylor has been undeniable. Like I did a video talking about incomings and outgoings off the back of that Postecoglou interview you were mentioning. And like Greg Taylor, honestly, like see if like I've supported Celtic my whole life, right? But I speak to lots of people that watch Celtic that didn't watch Celtic until like 6 months ago. And all of them say like Greg Taylor is one of the best players in the team, undoubtedly. And I think if you're a scout coming to Celtic because you want to see Jota and you want to see O'Reilly and you want to see whoever, like you will see Greg Taylor. And the way I described him is he's like the N'Golo Kante of left backs. Like he doesn't stop him. Yeah, he's everywhere, man. He's like two people. He's like, we've spoken about it before, Declan. He ends up in right centre mids and open play and stuff like that. He's
the
mental.
master of the inverted fullback. Is that what we're calling Greg Taylor?
And but again, that tactical nous, that inverted, how he finds himself, he never lets it. How many goals have we conceded? And we've said Greg Taylor's screwed us over there.
Very little.
It's probably zero, especially since this kind of positional shape or whatever. So I think I've not changed my mind in the sense that I think the manager wants a real weapon of a left back that's like a winger. But I think just the emergence of Greg Taylor is, as I say, the only word for it's undeniable. You need to play him.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I don't think Pep Guardiola does tune in to listen to us to talk, but if he is listening, it's definitely hands off. I know Pep's.
Well, I know Ralph Rangnick listens to all my stuff, so maybe
well
he gets a cup job again.
But with Greg Taylor, yeah, absolutely, he's been absolutely phenomenal for Celtic, and it was great to see him going to the Scotland team, and he probably still had his doubters and amongst the Tartan Army saying, he's nowhere near the level, because what he's competing with in that Scotland team is the captain who plays for Liverpool, who at this present point in time, when he plays for Scotland, I don't rate highly. And that's not me with my red tinted specs on, because I like Manchester United.
Of course.
I just feel as if Robertson looks a much better player when he has Virgil van Dijk beside him. Like I would look like a much better footballer, Quinny, if I had Virgil van Dijk beside me, right? And then he's got Kieran Tierney, the guy whose boots he had to fill when he came in at Celtic. It was great to see some of the things that Kieran said about him, that he was getting tips off him about how to play the inverted role and stuff. Kieran's but down to the Premier League, he's proved that he can play at that level. He's a top athlete, top player. And then there's Greg Taylor. But, Steve Clark, from what he's probably seen in these games, we won't make this an international football podcast, but half against the Republic of Ireland and way to Ukraine, Greg Taylor's did himself absolutely no harm to be knocking at Steve Clark's door. Much like what we're talking about earlier about Celtic squad players that are getting their chance to prove themselves to the manager. Greg Taylor's champing that door to be saying, even if Tierney and Robertson's fit, you need to be looking at me. I'm playing every week for Celtic. I'm playing at a high level in the Champions League, and there's absolutely no reason why Steve Clark shouldn't be looking at Greg Taylor at this point in time.
Completely agree, especially if the injury record that Robertson and Tierney have both had over like the last year or two kind of persists. Robertson normally isn't really that injury prone, but the last little period he's had a few, hasn't he? But it is like, we're blessed for left backs, but I think Greg Taylor, like, honestly, like, he just pushes it even more, because Robbo and Tierney will be like thinking, Jesus, man, if I'm not 100% on it, then Clarkie won't pick him, and from a Scotland perspective, having 3 left back options like that is crazy. And again, it just goes on to the testament of Greg Taylor. Like, he can just perform at whatever, from what I've seen of him this season in particular, like Champions League, international, anything with Celtic in general, like he is of the level. I think if you take Greg Taylor out, you put him in a Premier League team tomorrow, give him a month, put him in an Italian team, Spanish team, give him a month, he'll be the level, and he'll be doing the same thing we see him doing at Celtic, like wherever else, if he was to, move on or whatever. Hopefully he doesn't. But again, like see, the thing about Greg Taylor, a lot of people sleep on, is he's 24. Like, if we all kind of treat him like he's 29 or something, he's just this mad Kilmarnock left back that we've got, and he's like some sort of, nuisance or a dead weight or something. But he's 24, man. Like, for a defender, a fullback in particular, like, his peak years are still to be had.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, one of the things said about Greg Taylor a lot was he's at his level playing in the league, and that's it. But to me, in these two games against Shakhtar Donetsk and Real Madrid, absolutely not. And for his country, he's far and above that level of football. No disrespect to the league, but he's made to play in big games for Celtic, and he's absolutely fine.
Yeah. You won't see too many left backs have as good a game against Valverde as Taylor had.
No, not at all. Who has been Real Madrid's top man in the Champions League so far in both games. So, yeah, all testament to Greg Taylor. Hopefully those performances continue. I think also, Quinny, when you look around the team and you've got somebody who works as hard as that, who obviously listens to the instruction given by the manager, it just raises everybody's game beside him. And going back to Welsh and Yates, who we spoke about earlier, who we expect to see at the weekend play for Celtic, it probably assures them that they've got such quality left backs, and Taylor on one side and Judah on the other side. And by the way, Ralston was absolutely fine when he came on for Scotland and featured, but both fullbacks that are, you would say are the starting fullbacks for Celtic, if we have such a thing, you're going to see Juranovic and Taylor. I think that assures the centre halves, but we're talking about Vickers being the shooting figure at the back. Taylor and Juranovic are absolutely fine. And
completely,
again, Taylor had a disappointing afternoon in Paisley. How many of those afternoons is he going to have over the course of the season? I don't expect too many. But look at this. We're 2 points top of the league. We have an absolute massive goal difference. It should have been 5. And people will say right away, the hard work done against Rangers at the start of the month of September was undone by dropping those points at St Mirren. I don't think that, because if we'd have lost that game and, beaten St Mirren, I think people would have actually probably had more of a concern that was the case at, Rangers coming to Celtic Park and all that stuff. We, needed challengers on the day, absolutely gubbed them. It was 4-0. People maybe got a bit ahead of themselves. There's a lot of football still to play. We've heard Jota and the manager say, awards aren't handed out September, October, whatever month it is. What's going to be important, it is May. But, I think all of us were happy and would have been even, but would have been in cloud 9 had we came through this stretch of games, completely unbeaten in the league, having won every game and probably won the game in Shakhtar. So you'd have been, what else could you have probably asked for? But people say it'll be 2 points dropped in Shakhtar. That will be decided come November time when we see the bigger picture with the Champions League. It could be a point gamed in Shakhtar. We don't know. We'll only know about that in November. And we've had that St Mirren game. But listen, if we get to the break at the World Cup and we're still top and we still have a big goal difference and we're still in the Champions League, or at the very least European football, I think everybody will still be happy with that.
Oh, big time, yeah. And I think, imagine going into the World Cup, and obviously it's unfortunate Scotland won't be there, but going to the World Cup,
the players will get a trip to Australia. I think some of them might even.
Oh yeah, we've got that friendly stuff is in December, November, isn't it?
November, yep. They play Everton and is it Sydney FC? I think Celtic play.
Yeah.
So that's just not a bad wee international break, that is it? Jetting off to Oz with the gaffer.
But if we're locked in for European football after Christmas and we're flying high in the league or whatever, the league resumes around Boxing Day or something like that. I think that's when the game's coming back.
It's the 17th. We go to Pittodrie on the 17th, I think.
Wow.
I seem to just have that date installed in my mind because obviously my life just switches off after we play Ross County, and this and I'm only kidding on. But yeah, it's the 17th. I think we play because I'm going to see Pearl and the team into Friday night, so it's definitely Saturday the 17th for away to Pittodrie.
So the World Cup final is on the 14th, I think, which is the Sunday, or the 13th. It's something like that. So like, we all hate international breaks, right? But this international break, it's like 6 weeks, but it's the World Cup. You know what I mean? And we've got some players in there that might do okay, and it might be a bit of fun for the group stages for us to follow some of our boys around. But the rest of the guys that don't make it, the club in general, if we're on like cloud nine, World Cup festival happens, all the rest of it, and then we come back into that festive period and like, yeah, like I think this period of the season is going to dictate like the next like 8 months or whatever thereafter. And like I kind of said, I don't think the manager and whatever will be taking Motherwell lightly. And like these results, this bunch of games we've got coming up, like it's such an exciting time to be playing for Celtic, and I'm sure that they'll all be, gunning to make up for the St Mirren drop points against Motherwell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we've also got the opportunity to book ourselves into another semi-final
Yep.
at Hampden, something we've got 100% record in.
Right.
Under hands that we've got to at least the semi-final every time. So we hope to do that again and go there. The big question I want to ask you, Quinny, is 9 changes at Ross County, 6 changes at St Mirren. It might not be as wholesale as that in this next period of time, right? But I still think we'll see changes to this Celtic team. Whether it might only be 2 or 3, which I absolutely don't mind at all. But, in this next batch of fixtures, 13 games, 43 days, there's 4 Champions League games in there, which are going to dictate European football after Christmas. So it's 8 league fixtures, 4 European, and 1 in the Cup. There needs to be rotation for Celtic. There absolutely needs to be.
I think if there's going to be a wild card in the starting 11 against Motherwell, it will be that McGregor doesn't start. I think that's the wild card that could happen. With, like we were mentioning earlier, Abelgard's been knocking around, getting up to shape, and Moy coming back after his 90 minutes away with Australia. He's been back. And whereas McGregor played 90 minutes. I don't think, not many countries played 3 games this international break, and not many players played 90 minutes in all 3 international breaks, and Dave doesn't get a break for us anyway. So I think, but again, like the duality with that is then maybe you want him playing, going into Leipzig, you want to keep him hot, you want to keep him fresh and ticking over, sub him after 60 once we get the lead. Maybe that's the strategy that he goes with. But I say, if there was a wild card, if there was a random change in the starting 11, I think it's the McGregor position. Maybe Moy or Abelgard come in.
That's an interesting one. I personally think he'll stick with his captain.
I think so too. But I think if there was something wacky, it would be those 90 minutes with Scotland are huge.
Looking at the team overall, looking at that last 10-minute period, Joe Hart, one of the first teams on the team sheet, fine. 2 fullbacks, obviously, Juranovic was rested in that second game for Croatia. He's back, clean bill of health. You'd expect him to start against Motherwell, wouldn't you?
Agreed.
And Taylor on the other side.
Yeah.
But we're both agreeing that it's likely to be Welsh and Yates at centre half due to the injuries we've got, and we might see Carl Starfelt feature at maybe some point in the game.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But again, we might see the press conference tomorrow, and the manager might say Starfelt's back and he's up and running again. So I think that's something that we're pending latest details on.
If that happens, I think it's then Yates and Starfelt probably go as the pair. Would you agree in that one as well, Quinny? Just due to the experience of Starfelt, we know he is likely one of the first choice picks at centre half, and Yates, just with his experience and what he maybe brings to your team, is likely one to get matched up with Carl Starfelt.
Yeah, that's what I would imagine the manager goes with for sure.
Even though you maybe had that wee doubt about a wild card, should I say no? I doubt. It's probably likely to be McGregor, Hatate, O'Reilly. Then, possibly Aaron Moy off the bench. Possibly, you might even see a Degucci on the bench for Celtic at the weekend. You never know. And that could be the type of game he came on actually against Motherwell of all teams at the end of last season. That 6-0 win. So, there's potential there. And we've mentioned Abelgard, where we know that Turnbull won't be featuring due to his injury. Then up front, I think you're likely to see Jota because he's had that extended break. I'm sure that'll have helped him. I'd imagine Kyogo will come back in. He didn't play that second game either for Japan. And in the right hand side, you'd imagine it's going to be Lee Alabada. And I do actually think, Quinny, I want you to throw this into the mix. The elephant in the room almost. James Forrest is still a part of the Celtic squad.
You're going to say
and I think that in this next period of games, you are likely to see him. And whether people like it or not, I know he's a person who divides opinion. But I think a game like Saturday, coming off the bench for half an hour, is the exact type of thing that Ange Postecoglou is more than likely to do with James Forrest, like he did up in Dingwall. Nick, he wanted to get his goal, and he's
Yep.
nearing that 100 goal target. And why not try and get there in this next batch of fixtures coming off the bench or whatever?
Yeah, and that's it. And Forest will be made useful in this window, in this period. And even like the first Israel game, Abada came off in the 70th minute, and there was some like, oh, maybe Abada's got an injury, but he then played the following 90 thereafter or
And
something
the under
like that.
21, it was the under 21 game, I
Once
think, against the Republic of Ireland. So
against Ireland, yeah,
he is fine, but he's played both games, so he might just 70 minutes maybe
yeah,
off you come and have a wee rest, and then
yep. We Jimmy on.
that'll do what he tip people over the edge, calling James Forrest Jimmy, by the way, because that'll really get in people's nerves. But again, but we've even mentioned Bernaby. I mean, you picture that as finishing the game with Bernaby
Forest
on
and
one
Bernaby.
side of the wing and Forrest on the other side of the wing. I mean, listen, I don't think there's anything
We wee
off
Vata
the
through the middle.
hell, you know. But while we're short, why not fire Rocco Vata on the bench at this point in time? Because we're going to need to use the squad, as I keep saying. And I don't think a bad performance against St Mirren says that's it. Let's don't use the squad. And I've heard this kind of creeping in with some people that the squad isn't as strong as we thought. The bench isn't really that strong. I think that's nonsense. One game. So would you agree in that some of the guys that we've maybe not seen feature all too much as of yet, just might start to kind of creep into that Celtic team just a wee bit?
Yeah, I think it's definitely on the cards over the next couple of games, particularly with the cup games, because we've seen rotation there before. But again, I think it might. I think maybe if the manager's talking about learning lessons from his team selection against St Mirren, maybe it is just stick to what you know, play the best 11, and as soon as the results in hand, get the subs maybe a bit quicker. Because that was one of the things I think. Well, I think it was with it was Real Madrid or Rangers or something like that. But I think it was Real Madrid. The subs were, I think they were around the 72nd, 75th minute. Normally we get subs quite quickly about the 60th minute. So I think maybe there'll maybe be a wee bit more focus on that. We might not necessarily in the league and in Europe, we might not see too much rotation on the starts, but we might see like a huge sway on the benches because like we're talking about with the kind of lack of depth we've got with the perceived injuries to Haksabanovic, Giacomakis and Maeda, is maybe Forrest is the only real credible attacking substitution that can be made, which
I think
then,
he's all we've got.
yeah, which pretty much leaves the door open.
Apart from youth players that you're maybe bringing into the side, because as you say, they're kind of, Jacko definitely out the weekend. Haksabanovic came off early against Finland for Montenegro, so likely out. We don't know the condition of Daisen Maeda, so that leaves you with Jota, Kyogo, and Abada, as well as James Forrest. So you'd almost say that you've kind of lost your, not reserve or B team, because we know that Ange Postecoglou doesn't have that. It's all about rotation, but maybe your second choice front three almost. You could if you want to dub at that or whatever, you've lost that. But James Forrest seems to be this kind of seventh mystical forward that's not really. Yeah, he's still available. People don't really see him as part of the plans, but I certainly think the manager's got him there for a reason and a purpose. He's spoken about how much of a figure he is in the dressing room, and but we've seen him come off. He scored in his last game against Ross County. For 2 or 3-0 up at the weekend, which is best case scenario that we're hoping for, fire him on. Let's see, because one, it means that you're not going to have one of your top players burning out or picking up an injury, and it lets Forrest try and get to a target, and it hopefully gives us more goals. So to me, that's a win-win for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Forrest will be highly effective in this kind of situation. We've seen it. He's already scored. He's happy. The problem with people that do this kind of role that Forrest is doing for us is that they get disillusioned or they stop putting maximum effort in or whatever. Whereas he's buzzing. I heard interviews with him at the beginning of the season or when he signed his contract, and I think we've referenced this quote before, but he said like he speaks to people all the time that talk about regret leaving Celtic, and he's just not going to give himself that regret. So I think he like really just leans into it, and he's going to give his most at every turn possible. And having a player like that you can snap your fingers and call upon into a time of need that will bust his hump for you and has done it and will do it in the Scottish Premiership, no problem at all, is a phenomenal guy to have around.
Yeah, and listen, he didn't make a massive impact under Ange Postecoglou last season. He had injury issues. He's had injury issues now for a wee while. But if you think back to the goal against St Johnstone in the semi-final, of the League Cup.
Yeah.
The third goal at Livingston to really seal the deal. These are moments where, you know, his experience is important, and he will come up with them in the course of a season. You know, scoring the fourth goal away to Ross County in the Cup when the game's done, it isn't that moment. But, you know, I fear if you win one game 1-0 in a stretch of time and it's a league game, and it's, I don't know, I'll wait to St Johnstone or something, he comes on to score the winning goal. That's his big impact moment, and he
Totally.
can probably pat himself on the back for that. And the manager, from what he probably has come to expect, because he's not going to play a lot, if he can get 2 or 3 of those moments in the course of a season, I think the manager will be quite happy with that.
I would be happy with that as well, you know. And it wasn't really that long ago. We've been talking about Scotland on and off. It wasn't that long ago. James Forrest was scoring hat tricks, and he was this final saviour for Scotland. You know, the only forward we've got with a bit of pace and a bit of guile. You know, so football's got a short memory in that respect. You know, and Forrest fit and like motivated is a great player to have around and can be made use of at this kind of time.
Yep. So there we go. We're probably going to end up called the James Forrest CSC in here, but we've raved about a lot of players on here. You know, we've spoken about Moriyasu. If he listens in, play Rio Hitati, give him a chance. Just don't play him enough that teams and scouts end up having too much of an eye on him. Greg Taylor, we've spoken about James Forrest, our forward players, the use of the squad. Quinny, we'll see what happens. An hour's gone past really quickly again. It's
Wow.
I don't know whether we'll be on before the Leipzig game. I think we'll maybe keep our pod to just after the Leipzig game. So, you know, these wee batches will probably have about 6 in the run up to the World Cup. We will have 2 games to talk about, which is exciting for us because it gives us plenty to chat about. We'll see how we get on at the weekend. I think it'll be important that we do return to winning ways. And then it's into that Leipzig game in the Champions League, which I'm really hoping that we can get a big result from that can really kickstart our campaign in the Champions League. And even a point away from home isn't going to be a bad result against RB Leipzig if it does come to that. So, as always, all our listeners, thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in. If you are watching on YouTube, please do like the video. Subscribe at the bottom of the page. We are giving gifts away every month, monthly prizes. Sorry, I've not had that ticker tape up as I usually do. But it is there, so please do subscribe to the channel. We will be back covering Celtic in the next few weeks in this very busy period of time. We'll be chatting all things SPFL Premiership, Champions League. We're leaving in that wee cheeky Premier Sports game in there. Right. Quinny, as always, a pleasure. Thanks for joining me on the Celts Are Here podcast, and thanks to all our listeners who have tuned in once again.